Hello, my name is Kiriath, and today we are going to talk about the Elegoo Saturn II. Now I know what you're thinking, didn't you talk about the Neptune 3 yesterday? Why are we doing a double whammy of printers? Well, the answer to that is because Elegoo are incredibly kind and generous and decided to send me the Saturn II and the Neptune 3 to check out the two newest versions of those printers. And you know what? I was excited to try the Neptune 3 because my past experience with FDM printers has not been ideal, and so I was looking forward to seeing if I could actually do stuff with one, which I could, and I'm very happy about that. But I'll be honest, I was more excited about the Saturn II, because I do quite a lot of resin printing. I mean, there was a point at which I had 3 resin printers running pretty much overnight every night for a few weeks. I've slowed down a little bit since then because there comes a point where you simply do not have the free time to paint the vast array of models that you have printed, which is currently where I'm at. And I've not really helped myself by printing quite a few small but very detailed miniatures as a way to test the Saturn II out. So the thing is, I love the Saturn. The Saturn has become my favourite printer because it has a larger build plate, you can fit more on, you can print more stuff, and you can print larger stuff. And so the prospect of doing that all over again, but in glorious 8K, a higher resolution LCD screen so you get more detail on the models, I'm 100% in on that, especially since the build plate is bigger. You know what? Let's just go over the specs quickly before we get into the miniatures I've printed, and you can take a look at how good this thing is. So the Saturn II is an 8K resin printer with a 10-inch 8K LCD screen and a print size of 219 by 123 by 250 millimeters, which is pretty sizable and bigger than the original Saturn. There's also some nice quality of life changes in terms of there being some 9H tempered glass over the screen itself, which, if you are a clumsy oaf like me and you have nearly dropped the tank whilst removing it from a printer before and had to catch it just before it hit said screen, that is really nice to know. Not that I've ever done that, obviously. It comes with an air purifier that you plug into the printer whilst it's running. With any luck, you won't have the activated carbon stolen out of yours by customs in the UK, which is what happened to mine. Oh, and the price on Amazon for the Saturn II is going to be $600, and they are going to be going up for sale tomorrow. And the power button is on the front, which you might think to yourself, why even point that out? Who cares? What difference does it make? The power button on the Saturn is on the back. And this is a very first world problem. I'm not going to suggest that everyone's going to have this issue, because that's not the case. I know it's not the case, you know it's not the case. But for me personally, I don't have a vast amount of space for having 3D printers, right? They have to go in my office, they largely run overnight with the window like on the latch and with air purifiers going, and there's enough ventilation that it's fine, but I have a couple in a relatively tight space, and trying to reach round the Saturn to switch it on has proven to be a little bit of an issue when there's been printers next to it. And for a time I was running 3 resin 3D printers, and so there wasn't a huge amount of wiggle room. The fact that the power button's on the front really probably only makes any difference to me, and that's fine, but I like it. It's way easier. The USB port is still on the side, which I would kind of prefer easier access for that, but you know what, you can't have everything. It's fine, it's better than it was, and I much prefer the current setup on the Saturn II. Now, as I'm sure you've probably noticed when we first started talking about this thing, the Saturn II is a bit of a unit. It's got the girth, it's quite the chunky boy, really quite large even compared to the Saturn, which is a fairly large 3D printer. It's not like Jupiter size. I know there's almost industrial size ones that you can get, but when it comes to your kind of consumer grade resin printers, I felt like the Saturn was already on the large side of things. The Saturn II is even bigger, taller at the very least, and the overall footprint, it does feel a little bit larger. But then again, you are getting increased resolution out of it and a bigger build plate so that you can print more stuff at a higher detail, and I kind of feel like it's worth the extra space, to be honest with you. Now, it's all very well talking about it, but the most important thing is, what can it do? And I tested it not by printing one gigantic model, but by printing quite a few smaller ones. You see, there is a creator for 3D sculpts called Bestiarium Miniatures, and I love them. We've talked about them plenty before, but there are some specific models that they have done that I've wanted to print for ages. And they would come out in decent quality on the Saturn, they would come out in decent quality on the Mars 2 Pro, and that's fine. But, they are small, and there's a lot of detail work that's gone into them. And so I thought a good test for the Saturn 2 would be to print a bunch of these small but highly detailed miniatures and see how it does. And funnily enough, it's done pretty damn well. For the size of these things, for context, nowhere near the size of, say, a Primaris Marine. There is quite a lot of nice detail that is crammed into what is quite a small model. There's lots of slim sections of these models where, like, the legs aren't chunky or heroic scale. They are closer to what I'd count as being like a realistic scale. They are really quite delicate in places with a lot of texture work going on. Things like the Warlock has got a very like rough woven texture on the cloak. You've got a full dress on one of them where it has lacing around the edges of the dress section and a veil across the face. With the Torturer, that guy has got a ton of tiny spikes and little folds of cloth and very defined muscles. And you know what? The Saturn 2 has picked all of that out really nicely on all of them. Overall, the print quality of this thing is just really, really good. It picks out small, intricate details really well. It picks up tiny carvings in armour, the texture of different cloths, things like tiny spikes come out looking sharp and well defined. It being 8K really makes a difference over the Saturn. It genuinely does. There is just more detail packed into these models than there is on the ones that I've printed on the Saturn. And the thing is, the Saturn isn't even a bad printer. The models that have come out of that I've been super happy with, but there is just an extra level of detail and crispness to these that I really, really like. Now, I am going to be embarking on a larger print with this thing, and it will be featured next week as Print of the Week, because I want to do a dragon. I want to specifically do, it's a fairy dragon type thing. I will leave the details for now, and it can be a nice surprise, but I'm looking forward to seeing what it does with a much larger model. The thing is, when it came to testing it out, I wanted to do small things. I wanted to do things that were very detailed but in a small package and see how well it coped with them. And I am super happy with the models that it printed. These are ones that I've kind of eyed up for ages, but I've always felt that given the size of them, given the proportions, they would need to be really, really well printed for them to like be satisfying to paint and satisfying to look at. And I'm super glad I waited to do it on the Saturn 2 because I think they've come out exactly how I wanted them to. As it stands, I've got absolutely no complaints about the Saturn 2. I'm really enjoying using it, and it's producing some really nice crisp miniatures which I will have to paint soon. They're actually for D&D, but I'm not going to tell the party what they're for, because of course you're not going to do that. You don't want to give the game away, do you? So they need to get done sooner rather than later. I'm looking forward to printing something big on this thing. I think it could well end up doing this particular model I have in mind some serious justice. And as it stands, I love the Saturn. The Saturn has been very good to me. The Saturn 2 feels like the same printer, but better. Just better. Bigger and better, in fact, which makes sense, because that's exactly what it is. Thank you again to Elegoo for sending the Saturn 2 over to me. There will be a link in the description for you to check out if you want to learn more. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time.